35 seconds. It only required that. Not 35 seconds after tip-off, not 35 minutes into the game, not 35 possessions. On the floor, the choice that had basketball fans debating for weeks had already begun to make sense. Seagal's blitz defense had a predetermined strategy when they took the court. Before Team USA could even establish their attacking identity, apply early pressure, trap the ball handler, create mayhem in the backcourt, and force errors. In 35 seconds, that scheme performed flawlessly, but not against the player who was supposed to be running the point, according to most observers. Chelsea Gray was lying on the ground. Music on the bench was Caitlin Clark. Brianna Stewart, Dana Bonner, and everyone watching from home had a fairly clear idea of where this starting lineup conversation music was going by the time the first quarter had just begun. Here's the problem, though. There is more to this film than just a coaching choice. It concerns what transpired upon Clark's eventual check-in, what it did to 50 years' worth of international basketball records, and what it all subtly tells us about the 2026 season, which Indiana Fever supporters are already planning. Because the version of Clark that was beginning to truly dominate professional basketball prior to the accident derailing everything did not simply resurface. She returned and promptly reminded everyone why hype was never the main topic of conversation around her. When she's on the floor, it's always about what the numbers do. Let's return to the actual state of affairs before the tip-off. Because Clark was facing pressure that wasn't typical for the first game. It took more than rust and anxiety to get back into a competitive groove. Her face, advertising materials, and event music branding were the focal points of FIBA and its broadcast partners' marketing strategy for the whole qualifying tournament. Clark was prominently featured in every piece of visual content they released before this game. And all of that was built around a player who hadn't played music on a competitive basketball court in 239 days. 239 days. Music that's not a layoff due to a minor injury. That's not a couple weeks of discomfort and upkeep. That's months of recuperation, training centers, regulated exercises, and no actual gaming scenarios. Music, don't be defensive. Pressure that has real significance. No stakes, no crowd, no music, just labor, recuperation, and waiting. Then you enter a gym where every banner features your music face, a tournament has been built around your comeback, and a head coach decides to start the game without you in the starting lineup. The majority of players in that position either tighten up under pressure and play cautiously or come out eager to show something as soon as they check in. Clark didn't either. She was asked directly about the pressure and music prior to the game, and her response was actually illuminating. She told reporters that although she anticipated feeling nervous before the event, her feelings changed. She was delighted rather than nervous. It's not a Medi-trained non-answer. Music that's a significant psychological difference. Excitement and anxiety share nearly the same physiological characteristics. Increased energy, attentiveness, and heart rate, as well as a search for a destination. However, your performance under that condition is entirely different depending on how you understand it. Prior to the game, she made another statement that received less attention than it merited. Music, she made it very apparent that you shouldn't try to be the star player on this stage. That's not how the United States basketball is effective. Consider what you can learn from such framing. That's hardly someone who is eager to return and light up a stat sheet after spending 239 days on the sidelines. Instead of trying out for a larger role, that person spent those months studying, watching movies, and comprehending her place in a particular system. Already, the attitude was not what you would anticipate, and the performance that the following made it hard to ignore how different they were. Let's now discuss the decision that initiated all of this, as it was illogical to start Chelsea Gray at point guard. The reasoning made perfect sense on paper. Music Gray is a seasoned veteran who has won championships. At the top levels of professional basketball, she has achieved success. When things get tough, she knows how to launch an attack and maintains her composure. Circumstances that the majority of athletes attempt to master during their careers. Before tip-off, Carrera Lawson examined her roster, considered her alternatives, and made a decision that any rational basketball expert could support. Music, the issue is that Seagal didn't give a damn about what made sense on paper. In order to cause confusion in the backcourt, Segal developed an aggressive full-court blitz technique. The concept underlying this type of defensive pressure is simple yet cruel. Before the ball handler can advance the ball, trap them. Compel them to make tough choices in the backcourt before the offense has a chance to plan and create turnovers due to uncertainty and confusion. It's a risky defensive tactic because it gives the ball handler immediate advantages in transition if they can break the press cleanly. However, if the ball handler falters even a little, the entire offense may fail before it even begins. Gray was removed from the point guard position in less than 35 seconds. In order to handle the ball and control the pressure, Darka Hamby and Angel Reese, two players whose natural roles had little to do with starting offense under a full-court press, were filling in. The offensive system was not being carried out by the starting unit. They were making it. They were trying to keep afloat long enough for something to emerge while absorbing Segal's onslaught. Furthermore, that isn't a critique of any one of those players. Gray plays basketball at a high level. Although Hami and Ree are both very good at what they do, Senegal's blitz was structurally intended to undermine the very type of systematic offensive structure that the music unit was created around, and it was effective. Lawson then made the replacement. As soon as Clark arrived, she made 3 assists on her first 3 touches. 3 music assists on 3 straight possessions, not 3 assists in the first quarter. The game's tempo fluctuated in real time. Senegal's defense was abruptly responding rather than dictating, and you could sense it on the radio. The beginning unit was scrambling after the same full-court assault, but suddenly it was something else different. It's a circumstance to assess and take advantage of, not a challenge to survive. Music here's why that change was so important, and why Clark's improved ball handling under duress wasn't the only factor. Music Singler's blitz strategy is predicated on the idea that the ball handler will either attempt to force their way through the trap, pick up their dribble, or make a snap decision. Any of those reactions play right into the hands of the defense. The passing channel vanishes, the trap shuts, and the offense either occurs or resumes with little momentum at all. None of those actions were being taken by Clark. Before the trap was even fully formed, she was reading Segal's defensive alignment. She was finding teammates in rhythm, spotting the weak point of the press, and passing the ball into areas that were too short for most point guards to notice. The relationship that evolved between Clark and Ryan Howard during the game was particularly detrimental to Segal. Each time Segal made a commitment to the blitz, Howard was standing at the arc with a tidy appearance each time they applied that forceful pressure. Segal's coaching staff was presented with a true dilemma because Clark was constantly finding him so early in the shot clock. Reduce the pressure and allow Clark to play freely at the point of attack with room to make choices, or continue blitzing and give up wide-open threes to one of the finest shooters on the floor. There was no compromise. There was no defense. Modification that song simultaneously tackled both issues. It's more than just skillful play. That's music, the kind of decision-making that disrupts defensive systems conceptually, leaving the defense with no viable response because the offensive player has already taken into consideration both possibilities before the play even starts. Howard scored a team-high 21 points at the end of the contest. Additionally, the announcer specifically noted that nearly all of his three-point Clark's readings served as the inspiration for music. She was producing excellent looks for a teammate at a pace and consistency that Senegal was just unable to match. Music Clark scored 17 points in the end. 5 out of 5 from the free throw line and 4 out of 5 from 3. Not to mention the record-breaking facilitation in just 19 minutes off the bench. Snorts, let's now examine the records in particular, because when you comprehend the entire context around each one, they all land differently. Men or women, whatever music era, record one of the most assists in a Team USA senior national team debut. With 12 assists, Clark has more assists than any player who has ever made their debut for the U.S. senior national team. Music, no athlete has ever provided more assists in recent years, not in women's basketball specifically, across both programs, or during every era of Team USA senior national team competition. In their first game than Clark did in 19 minutes after coming off the bench. The first record is that. Music, the second record goes well beyond American basketball. Most assists in any senior national team debut in FIA competition for both men and women from all nations. Music every nation that plays international basketball and every senior national team debut game ever officially documented. Clark's 12 assists is the record for all of it. Not only for the United States, but also for all programs, eras, and players who have ever competed in FIA-sanctioned senior international competitions. Music the third recording situates her performance within a distinct historical framework. The second highest number of assists in the history of the FIA qualification event. The complete record for every qualifying game ever played by any music player at any level of FIA qualification competition, not debut records or single-game categories. The second longest game in the tournament format's history, lasting 19 minutes. Given the circumstances, record number 4 may be the most impressive. Most assists in FIA history by any player, male or female, coming off the bench are the game wasn't started by her. Despite playing fewer than 20 minutes as a reserve and coming off the bench, she still holds the FIA record for most assists by a reserve player. The record is not qualified by gender, era, or level of competition. For any substitute player in FIA history, it is the all-time record. 5 is the most assists in a single half of an FIA qualifying match ever. Before halftime, there were 8 assists and no turnovers. In just the first half, 19 minutes divided into 2 quarters, Clark was effectively undermining music, a defense that was put in place especially to stop her from doing what she was doing. That portion stands alone as a record, unrelated to anything else she did during the game. 239 days away from competitive basketball, 5 music records, and 19 minutes. It's easy to read 12 assists and assume that the game was simply going Clark's way and the stats piled up organically. Thus, the 0 turnover number deserves its own discussion. That was not the case. The fact that this effort has 0 turnovers is what really sets it apart from a fantastic game. Category. The statistical truth of high assist totals is as follows. They are nearly always dangerous. You're working at the boundaries of what's controlled and what turns into a turnover when you're pushing tempo, making aggressive reads, trying to find teammates in rhythm before defensive rotations can close, and playing music. Almost always, the players with the highest turnover music totals are also the ones who have the highest assist totals in basketball history. It's not a coincidence. It reflects the inherent contradiction between proactive facilitation and ball security. You take more chances the harder you try to create for your teammates. And sometimes such opportunities don't work out. Music, it was all Clark's doing. The quick judgments made before the defense could line up, the aggressive reads, the pressing pace, and not providing the ball away once. Music not once during the first half against a defense designed to create mistakes. After 8 months away from professional basketball, that particular combo produced record-level assists with 0 turnovers against a team whose entire defensive strategy was based on making precisely the mistakes Clark wasn't making. That goes beyond efficiency. That falls under the categories of situational and processing speed. Awareness that very few basketball players, regardless of ability, have ever shown. It provides you with particular information on what transpired throughout those 239 days. Recovering physically from an injury is one thing. The competitive and cognitive acuities are quite different. When they return to competitive basketball, players who have been away for a long time nearly always exhibit some uncertainty in their decision-making. There is a tiny delay in analyzing defenses and hesitancy when making passes that must happen fast. Clark didn't display any of that. The readings came right away. The choices were clear-cut. Before the defensive window closed, the ball was delivered. Getting her body right wasn't the only thing she was doing during that rehabilitation procedure. One aspect of this performance that was slightly obscured by the records and the coaching debate was the team's overall performance in spite of their surroundings. In that match, 6 players simultaneously made their senior national team debuts. Angel Rhee, Paige Beckers, and 4 other players were making their senior debut on the international scene, which typically results in a degree of disorganized play that even the best lineups find difficult to avoid. Typically, debuts are readable. The hesitancy, the subtle awkwardness of unfamiliar spacing before making certain cuts, the moments where the chemistry that takes time to build just isn't quite there yet. Music that wasn't how this team appeared. Throughout the entire game, Beckers moved within the offense like someone who had been using this method for months rather than hours, making the moment appear entirely regular. Angel Ree's debut was as near perfect as it gets. 8 rebounds, 1 missed shot that evening, and the positional and physical labor that makes everything happen on the perimeter truly sustainable. In a game where facilitation and shooting tales dominate music, it is easy to ignore that kind of interior presence, but it is crucial. The perimeter players can take chances they normally couldn't since they know the punishment for a missed shot is lessened when the interior defense and rebounds are managed well. Lawson received a coordinated high tempo from this ensemble rather than 6 new musicians' music producing 6 distinct adjustment curves. Once Clark was running it, the offensive scheme was producing nice looks on nearly every drive. Without genuine compatibility among the staff, that doesn't occur. Additionally, it provides some insight into how this roster music was assembled and produced. However, it also raises a legitimate issue about what this group's ceiling looks like as the novelty of the first game's fades and Lawson's preferred combinations become more apparent. This leads us straight to what Lawson stated following the match. When Kara Lawson arrived at the post-game platform, she said something that, for anyone familiar with coaching jargon, immediately stood out. The lineup and rotations are in finding mode, she stated. When coaches are happy, they don't say that. Music that particular wording is neither a media management strategy nor a diversion. It's a clear indication that the rotation hasn't found its final shape, the starting lineup isn't decided, and that what transpired on the floor during that game is actively influencing what she will do differently the next time. In addition, she did more than simply acknowledge flux. She specifically named Clark, Kelsey Plum, Enrique Ogunbale, and Monique Billings as the unit that, in her opinion, elevated them to a new level during the second quarter. Music she publicly and explicitly identified the unit as the one that improved the game. That apparatus did excluding Chelsea Gray. That wording is not ambiguous. That's a head coach publicly naming the lineup combination that altered the outcome of the game during a post-game news conference, notably omitting the player who started at point guard. The story was already being told by the act on the floor. At the platform, Lawson was verifying that she was reading it in the same manner as the rest of us. How soon she takes action on it is the only question. Now, a reasonable question to pose here is whether this team's 64-point victory over Senegal truly reveals anything significant about how they handle tough international competition. That is a valid point. Senegal is not a top-tier international program, and the victory margin by itself does not demonstrate that the system is prepared for the most difficult challenges the qualifying event will pose. Here's why. Despite its technical validity, the challenge obscures the true meaning of this game. The Clark's decision-making against a defense designed to force turnovers is independent of the opponent's caliber. It doesn't alter the reality that when the press was active and aggressive, there were no turnovers on 12 assists. Music it doesn't alter how the offense changed from a unit enduring pressure to a unit using it as a weapon as soon as she arrived. These are not outcome indicators. Rather, they are process indicators. The margin of victory is single. What matters about Clark is how he made decisions under that particular defensive pressure. Regardless of who is on the other side of the floor, the information it disclosed about her processing speed, field vision, and real-time reading and reaction skills were applicable. All of this has a very particular significance for Indiana Fever supporters that extends far beyond the qualification campaign. The WNBA in 2026, the next season, will see Clark regularly spend more than 30 minutes a night on the court in a competitive professional environment. The player who is beginning to truly reshape what was possible in a WNBA offense, the decision-making, the pace, and the way she was creating clean looks for teammates at a rate the league hadn't really seen, was sidelined by an injury in 2025 before the season ever really got going. Before spectators could witness what a healthy season looked like, that player practically vanished. This game serves as a sneak peek at the beginning of that season. During the game, The Indiana Fever's Instagram account celebrated the double-double in real time, which gives you an idea of how the team is interpreting her performance and what they want their supporters to think of her comeback. Lawson has already made it clear to the public where the lineup is going. The facilitator in 19 minutes off the bench that set a record. The 0 turnovers in the face of a tight defense. When she was on the ground, the offense's character completely shifted. All of this leads to one conclusion about what it looks like for Clark to operate a system for more than 30 minutes when she is engaged, in good health, and moving with a true competitive beat. The 2026 Fever team ceiling is significantly different from what the majority of WNBA forecasts currently take into consideration. It's not due to individual skill alone, but due to the qualifying game's demonstration of the system-level output Clark produces when working unrestricted. The way teammates are suddenly getting clean looks in rhythm instead of contested shots at the end of the shot clock, as well as the speed and reads. That isn't unique to any one game. It's a process that can be repeated. And it remained unchanged after 239 days away from the tournament. This is where everything ends up. 239 days off the ground. In just 19 minutes off the bench, 5 FIBA world records were shattered. A head coach who just made it clear that the starting lineup is still up for debate at the post-game podium. A 64-point victory that was mostly based on a decision-making engine that transformed a full-court press intended for turnovers into a system that generated fast breaks and a group of 6 rookies who, rather than appearing as 6 distinct adjustment curves, appeared like an organized, fast-moving unit with a true offensive identity. Clark didn't only look fantastic after recovering from an injury. As a reserve player, she immediately performed the most historically significant facilitated performance in the history of the FIBA qualifying tournament without giving up the ball against a defense whose whole strategy was to force the precise mistakes she refused to commit. By themselves, the records don't tell the narrative. The documents only serve as a numerical validation of what everyone who is listening to the music could already see. That she is performing at a level that international basketball has actually never achieved in a debut performance, including her processing speed, vision, and ability to read a defense and make the appropriate decision before the window closes. The question Lawson purposefully left open at that podium will be addressed at the following qualifying match. Music, does Clark begin? Does the unit for the second quarter that could the squad that she recognized as elevating the game become the initial unit? Music, does the 35 seconds and 19 minutes of live basketball that Chelsea Gray just displayed on the court outweigh her championship history? Although there are currently no answers to those questions, the direction they are pointing in has been evident since Clark checked in and distributed 3 assists. Music on 3 touches. The defense, which had just shredded the starting lineup, was suddenly at a loss for answers. Not at all. 5 records, 1 direction, 239 days.